We need to say it clearly. Ferrari hit the lowest point of the season in Singapore, and Lewis Hamilton also had a brake issue. In today's video, we will explain why Hamilton had this braking issue, what's behind it, and what differentiates Ferrari from other teams like Mercedes, Red Bull, and McLaren. We need to analyze the words of Vasseur and Leclerc, and finally, we will also look at Verstappen's situation and why he dared to use the soft tire at the start, what Laurent Macchietti, Red Bull's principal, said about it. We also need to analyze the double zero of the Racing Bulls and the delayed renewal for George Russell's contract, who is proving to be having one of the best seasons of his career, possibly the best. Before we begin, please, if you like the videos, leave a supportive like, and now, let's see everything in detail. Ferrari in Singapore perhaps reached the lowest point of the 2025 season. There's no other definition. The Red emerged from the weekend as the fourth force without excuses and without support. Even Charles Leclerc at the microphones had no hesitations, this time without doubts. It's now 5 Grand Prix without a podium, and if we look at the numbers, the picture is ruthless. Mercedes consolidates the second place in constructors. Red Bull gets closer, and Ferrari seems to have lost the thread of its project. The problem isn't just Singapore. The trend is negative. For months, the team hasn't found continuity. They cling to some bursts of speed on Friday or in free practice 3, but in the race the limits emerge. The rivals have made a clear technical step. Mercedes has found stability and race pace. Red Bull remains competitive despite difficulties, and McLaren is consistent at the start of the year. Ferrari, on the other hand, struggles and finds itself chasing. Moreover, there's a key fact that explains why it's difficult to imagine a turnaround. All the teams are already focused on the 2026 projects, so what we see now, basic limits and chronic defects, is unlikely to change from now to Abu Dhabi. In Singapore, the Achilles heel was clear. The overheating of the brakes. Frederic Vasseur admitted it openly. We had cooling problems from the beginning. When we were in clean air, the pace was decent, but in traffic, everything went into crisis. In essence, as soon as Leclerc and Hamilton had to manage dirty air, temperatures exploded and pace dropped. It's a heavy technical signal because Ferrari historically had braking as a strong point, but instead in the Singapore Grand Prix, it was the opposite. One of the worst stopping abilities among top teams. By now, Ferrari collects several specific problems during the weekend, and there's a range so long it seems like a repeating script. We also remember, for example, Bahrain 2024, Baku this year, and also Singapore. Always a factor that ruins the race, never a clean Sunday. Leclerc is the mirror of Ferrari, tired, almost resigned, and he himself stated, Mercedes made a great step. Red Bull and McLaren have been there from the beginning. And us, the strategy was good, but it's not enough. Hamilton, who had also found a good rhythm after the second pit stop with the soft tires, gained 20 seconds on Leclerc and was hunting down Antonelli. Then the brakes said enough and his race ended with a demotion due to track limit. A final blow for an already bitter weekend with a 5-second penalty. The next 6 races, Austin, Mexico City, Interlagos, Las Vegas, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi, seem more like an obligation than an opportunity. Ferrari must hope to grasp at least some podiums to save face, but talking about victories is almost utopia. Second place in the Constructors' Championship seems impossible. And this is heavy because the minimum goal at the beginning of the year was to consistently fight for podiums and some victories. Today it seems very far away. The reality is that Ferrari can't maximize what it has, while the others can. Mercedes has refined its defects until becoming the second force. Red Bull, even in an imperfect year, remains lethal when needed. McLaren has built a solid base and is growing. Maranello, on the other hand, remains in limbo. This is the situation. The real question becomes, how deep is the crisis? Is it just a transition year looking towards 2026? Or is there a structural problem that goes beyond the single season? And we also hear the words of Lewis Hamilton, who described his race very well and the problems he encountered in the second part. Because yes, towards the end he had several braking problems, and then there was also the demotion. For 2/3 of the Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton had found the right key. A second pit stop and the soft tires had reignited the pace. He was grinding out 0.1 by 0.1. He had reduced the huge gap and set his sights on Antonelli for 5th position. But when it seemed done, the plot twist arrived. The brakes of the SF95 started to overheat, and Hamilton himself explained it without mincing words. The soft tires gave us a great pace to go on the attack and allowed me to recover ground. But unfortunately, a brake problem cost us an overtaking and the chance to bring home more points. Not only did the performance evaporate, but the penalty for track limits at the end made him slip to 9th place, turning a possible comeback into an almost useless day for the championship. Despite everything, Hamilton tried to look beyond. The last races have been tough, but there are positive aspects. I felt good in the car throughout the weekend, and in the last third of the race, we had a good pace. Now, we just have to maximize the package looking towards Austin and execute everything perfectly. It's a double message. On one hand, it acknowledges that Ferrari had the potential to do better right from the qualifiers. On the other hand, it almost seems to want to shake up the team, emphasizing that pure performance is not lacking, but it must be utilized without errors and technical problems. While Lewis Hamilton was struggling with the brakes, the team on the other side of the box, Charles Leclerc was having a frustrating afternoon. His engineer kept asking him to lift and coast to correct the temperatures, and Charles, exasperated, made it clear over the radio, indicating that thermal management continues to be a huge Achilles heel for Maranello. It's 12 points overall and Mercedes extends its lead. Red Bull gets closer with Verstappen bringing the majority of points for the Milton Keynes team. And above all, another wasted race where Ferrari had glimpsed the possibility of being ahead and then got lost among technical limitations and complicated management. The brake problem is not an isolated case. It is yet another episode in a championship where the SF25 fails to be complete. It yields speed at times, but then cooling tire degradation, conservative strategies, and small errors overturn everything. So will this Ferrari be able to react in the last 6 races? Or is 2025 already gone? We have seen that Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton have both experienced issues with lift and coast and brake overheating. But let's take a closer look at what it's about. It has almost become a trademark of this Ferrari season. If it's not the floor wearing out, it's the brakes giving way. In Singapore, we know that the floor is not fully exploited because they race at a higher height. And so to save the braking system, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton had to lift their foot before the braking point on every straight, losing tenths every lap. The pace was increasingly lower and the rivals became unreachable. But it's not just Singapore's fault. This is a pattern that has been repeating for months, and Charles Leclerc commented on it after the race. It's tough, really very tough at the moment. We are not competitive, and I see no reason to be optimistic. I don't think we will make any progress. And then he added, we made progress at the beginning of the year, but others have made more. Red Bull grew at Monza, Mercedes improved here in Singapore. Us, we have no new solutions coming. In short, Ferrari is stuck, and the rivals are racing ahead. And this is what worries more than any other technical detail. The feeling of stagnation in Ferrari. In a championship that constantly evolves, standing still means falling behind. However, it is also true that all teams are paying more attention to 2026 and the new regulations. The most dangerous part is not just the sports result, but the morale. When your top driver, who should be the benchmark, the face of the project, publicly says that there are no reasons to believe in improvement. The signal is heavy. Leclerc seems worn out. Too many years of promises and long-term projects that haven't delivered the hoped-for results. There are 6 races left, but the outlook is not encouraging. Mercedes has gained rhythm and points. Red Bull is back to being aggressive, and McLaren is consistent. Ferrari, on the other hand, will have to limit the damage, hoping at least not to lose 2nd place in the Constructors' Championship. But as of today, it seems a difficult goal to achieve. And the brake problem, which Hamilton encountered, occurred 2 laps before the end. It was a unique ordeal for the English driver. The brakes went into crisis 2 laps before the end. Temperature out of control. The pedal feeling was lost and the car was undrivable, with the SF25 no longer braking, and Hamilton did everything to avoid being overtaken by Alonso, even cutting some corners. The result, however, is that he received a 5-second penalty for track limits and thus finished in 8th place. This is not mere bad luck. The SF25 uses smaller brake discs compared to the competition, an extreme choice that has a very heavy side effect. Chronic overheating, and the need for continuous lift and coast. Already from the first laps, the pit wall had asked Lewis to manage, but he pushed hard at the end to try the big move, trying to catch Kimi Antonelli too. Result is that the brakes were cooked, and the race was to be thrown away. This limitation isn't new, and has been evident for Ferrari since the start of the season, but in Singapore, the compromise blew up at the worst possible moment. And without a doubt, the SF25 is the most difficult car Lewis Hamilton has ever driven, especially to push to the limit, because it is mediocre in every respect. Singapore could have been a comeback race, with a 1 or 2 stop strategy, and the potential to finish at least ahead of Mercedes, or try to finish at least ahead of Verstappen. Instead, it turned into another missed opportunity. The gap with Red Bull and McLaren remains huge, and Mercedes extends its lead in 2nd place in the Constructors' Championship. The problem is not just the individual result, but the perception that the project is fragile. The SF25 is born from aerodynamic compromises that make it slow both in qualifying laps and race pace, especially when in dirty air, and when even Hamilton, a master of adaptation, admits that the car is a disaster. The alarm bell becomes a siren. From Melbourne onwards, the track has dismantled every illusion created over the winter. The car that was supposed to bring Maranello back to fighting for the title is full of compromises and with a non-existent margin for development. And this is what worries me also in view of 2026, because you can't replicate a season like this year with a car that isn't strong on any track. Every weekend the story is the same. Good feelings on the simulator, and then already from the first free practice, you have to overhaul the setup to avoid balance problems or risk disqualification for the floor being too low. Thus, the potential seen in virtual numbers immediately evaporates, and you end up managing, doing lift and coast, saving brakes and tires instead of attacking. The result: 18 races without a win. Mercedes wins twice with a car not even updated. Only this new front wing introduced in Singapore, but nothing more. And Red Bull, although struggling, manages to reinvent itself and beat McLaren in certain conditions, while Ferrari remains stationary. Russell's victory in Singapore is the toughest demonstration. Mercedes, which has nothing more to ask of the World Championship except second place, still manages to maximize what it has. Ferrari, on the other hand, not even when it seems competitive on Friday, manages to transform that potential during the Sunday race. Red Bull, after an uncertain first part of the season, brought a new front wing and raised the level. Mercedes did the same thing, finding stability and taking advantage of every opportunity. Red Bull has also improved thanks to the new floor, while Maranello, nothing. The updates are minimal, one to the floor and one to the rear suspension, but these haven't given the necessary breakthrough to restart and be ahead. And this is where the situation becomes dangerous. Famous Project 668, which is the Ferrari of 2026, is in the hands of the same people who couldn't correct the defects of the SF25. And this is frightening. If a car is born wrong, and after 18 Grand Prix you can't give it direction, how can you convince the fans, and especially your drivers, that the future will be different? Leclerc knows it and makes it clear. In fact, after free practice 1 in Singapore, he had to change the balance because the car was unmanageable. All this despite previous tests and the new rear suspension introduced months ago has not given the hoped-for results. The most burning thing is that Red Bull and Mercedes, starting behind McLaren at the beginning of the season, today take turns competing with the MCL 39. Ferrari never, except in some isolated qualifying and in the Budapest race, where, however, in the second part, it struggled a lot and the Ferrari never became a real threat. And there is a doubt that becomes fear. Will those who failed to straighten out the SF25 today really be able to design a car that will have to face the regulatory revolution in 2026? This is the point that worries us fans and also the professionals the most. Ferrari is not only throwing away 2025, but also risks compromising the future. This is the situation Ferrari is experiencing at the moment, and what worries me also for the future. We have to see how Red Bull is handling the current situation. Also, because Verstappen wants to play every card in the Drivers' Championship. Indeed, Red Bull has no intention of giving up. Max Verstappen in Singapore tried a total gamble, starting with soft tires on a circuit that condemns them after a few laps. A calculated risk, almost desperate, but with a very clear goal. Get ahead at the first corner and turn the race into a solo performance. The idea was brilliant. Max knew that starting from the second box at Marina Bay means starting from the dirty part of the track with less grip. Furthermore, the rain that fell before the start had washed the asphalt, removing the deposited rubber and making everything more slippery. If he had gained the first position immediately, he could have set the pace even with a not perfect car. For this reason, Red Bull decided on used softs against the new mediums of the other top drivers. In the end, however, the dirt on the track won. Max wasn't able to overtake Russell at the start. He remained second, and from there the race froze. On a circuit where overtaking is almost impossible, his bet died after just a few seconds. Yet this is an important signal. Verstappen and Red Bull have nothing more to lose. McLaren is the car to beat, and the remaining tracks seem tailored to Piastri and Norris's papayas. That's why Max has to come up with something different. He has to take risks every time. And he himself said it. We knew that after turn 1, it would be impossible to pass, so we tried something different. It didn't work, but if I had been first, I could have won. This aggressive approach will become the rule until the end of the championship. Don't rely on the strengths of the RB21, but surprise, overturn strategies and gamble when necessary. The truth is that Red Bull in Singapore didn't have the fastest car. After the start, Verstappen had to manage the softs with great care, and then after switching to hards, remained vulnerable to Norris's comeback. Furthermore, Max had gearbox problems, difficulties in downshifting and gear insertion that made it complicated to really push to the limit. On a different track, he could have even lost second place. The car was not in the right window to push more. Max explained, emphasizing that the final podium is still a good result, considering everything that didn't work. The point is not the defeat in Singapore, but the message. Red Bull does not give up the fight. Even if McLaren seems unattainable and Mercedes won in Singapore, Max will always be there, ready to try risky moves just to get back in the game. And when a champion races with nothing to lose, he can become very dangerous. But can this extreme strategy of Red Bull really reopen the championship, or will it just be a flash in the pan? In my opinion, the championship is not closed, at least in this part of the season. Certainly, Piastri has it in hand and he can win it, but Max is not so far away and could take every chance in case the two Pias get into trouble on their own. Let's also look at the situation at Racing Bull. The weekend started off great at Giara in Q3 on a new track for him. At 21 years old, maturity of a veteran. It seemed like the prelude to another top 10, but reality hit hard. Just before the pit stop, the news no driver wants to hear comes over the radio. Hadjar had a problem with the power unit, and from then on the Franco-Algerians race became an ordeal. Wasn't our day. We were fast in the corners, but I lost everything on the straights. I hoped the others wouldn't catch me, but they did, and the blue flags complicated everything. And finally, he finished in 11th position, just outside the point zone. The weekend was also difficult for Liam Lawson. He started 12th, but couldn't make a comeback, and due to strategy finished only 15th, far from the points. Singapore marks the end of a positive streak, but should not erase what Racing Bulls has shown after the summer break. The ability to make the most of opportunities, and a rookie like Hadjar, who, when the car works, can already be in the top 10. The goal is to start again from Austin, understand what happened to the power unit, and not lose the confidence built in these last races. In my opinion, Racing Bulls will return to fight for the points zone from Austin onwards. It is worth highlighting the two mistakes Lawson made in Singapore, despite Lawson having a good weekend in Baku and Hadjar after the summer break, reaching the podium in the Netherlands. So Racing Bulls is competitive as a car. Breaking news. We obviously have to talk about Russell's race and also the lack of arrival of the contract renewal. What's going on? Mercedes in Singapore gave a lesson in solidity and race management. Russell dominated from start to finish with surgical driving and perfect tire management. It's his second win of the season, a clear message. The V16 is here and wants second place in the constructors. Yet behind this celebration, there's an unsettling mystery. Why hasn't Russell received the renewal yet? The success in Singapore was not just pure speed. Mercedes arrived at the weekend with little data on long runs, with no certainties about degradation and temperatures. Yet they found the right window. Russell built a steady rhythm, controlled tires and fuel consumption, while rivals behind struggled. Even Antonelli, after a difficult start, managed to come back and place the two Mercedes ahead of the Ferraris, an important blow in the battle for second place in the constructors. Andrew Chauvelin commented calmly, but between the lines, there was a lot of satisfaction. This result confirms that we are heading in the right direction, but consistency is needed until Abu Dhabi. In short, the technical base is now competitive, but a single victory is not enough to feel safe. And why hasn't the renewal arrived yet, despite Toto Wolff's praise for George Russell? Russell is in his 4th year at Mercedes, has beaten tough teammates like Lewis Hamilton, and has brought heavy points and clean leadership, and is never politically out of place. Yet the signature doesn't come. With Antonelli, caution is understandable, even though it is assumed that he will renew as well. While at Mercedes, it's all a matter of time. Russell signed a 1-year plus 1 contract. So 1 year of renewal plus the option to continue in favor of the British driver. And therefore, this is just a bit of market strategy. Wait to send Russell's renewal to have room in negotiations. So, in my opinion, after this victory in Singapore, the renewal between Russell and Mercedes is imminent. It will arrive soon and shortly, following Russell's conditions more than Mercedes, seeing that today, Mercedes clearly needs Russell to make him the first driver at Mercedes next year with the new regulations. Let me know in the comments your opinion on all the topics we discussed in the video. As always, I remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and activate notifications if you like the videos here on the channel. That's all from Rastro. See you in the next video.